Hi everyone, Teacher Janet here. Welcome back to my educational channel on biology. In this video, we're going to discuss Chapter 14 and our subtopic is 14.2, the musculoskeletal system of humans. So in this video, we're going to discuss the bones found in the human skeleton. Let's begin. The learning standards for this lesson are as follows. The first learning standard is we must be able to identify the bones that form the human skeletal system. And there are two parts in the human skeletal system, that is the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So we have to be able to identify the bones in the axial skeleton and also in the appendicular skeleton, which are both parts of the human skeletal system. Secondly, we should be able to characterize the types of vertebrae in the backbone, namely the cervical vertebrae, including the first cervical vertebra called the atlas and the second cervical vertebra called the axis. Other than that, there are other types of vertebrae, and these are the thoracic vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae, sacral vertebrae, and caudal vertebrae. Lastly, we should be able to compare and contrast the types of vertebrae. The skeletal system of humans. So the human skeleton of an adult consists of 206 bones. And the human skeletal system can be divided into two parts. The axial skeleton, which comprises the skull, vertebral column, ribs, and sternum, also known as the breastbone, and the appendicular skeleton, namely the pectoral girdle, pelvic girdle, and the bones of the upper and lower limbs. So here is a chart showing you the parts of the axial skeleton, the bones in the axial skeleton, and the bones in the appendicular skeleton. Now, for the axial skeleton, the parts or the bones involved are the skull, which consists of a number of bones, and then the vertebral column, which consists of 5 types of vertebra, which are the cervical vertebra, thoracic vertebra, lumbar vertebra, sacral vertebra, and caudal vertebra. Then we have the ribs and the sternum. All these are parts of the axial skeleton. Now for the appendicular skeleton, which is situated at the sides of the body, not in the center, alright? Axial skeleton is in the center part of the body, but the appendicular skeleton is at the sides. It consists of the pectoral girdle, which has 2 types of bones, the clavicle and the scapula. Then the bones of the upper limbs are the humerus, ulna, radius, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Now the pelvic girdle consists of 3 types of bones, the ilium, ischium, and pubis. The lower limbs consist of these bones, the femur, which is the hip bone, patella, the kneecap, tibia, fibula, tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. So this picture shows us the bones of the human skeletal system. And we can see the 2 parts of the human skeletal system, which are the axial skeleton in green, labeled in green, and the appendicular skeleton in yellow. Okay, so the axial skeleton is found in the center part of the body, comes from the word axis, all right, and it consists of the skull, which is made up of a number of bones. Then we have the sternum in the center, in the front of the body, and then we have the ribs, which are attached to the sternum in front and to the vertebral column at the back. Then we have the vertebral column, which extends from the neck right down to the hips or the pelvis region. Okay, so there are 5 types of vertebra, and we have to focus on these types of vertebra and study their adaptations for their functions later on. So now let's talk about the appendicular skeleton, which are labeled in yellow, right? So there are many more bones in the appendicular skeleton. The word appendicular comes from the word appendage, meaning the arms and the legs, right? Those are the appendages. Right, so at the very top here, at the shoulder level here, okay, in this region we have the clavicle, which is the thin long bone extending from the center part of the body to the end of the shoulder, right? So that's the clavicle. There are two clavicles, and at the back we have a triangular piece of flat bone called the scapula. So there are two scapulas, right? One on the left side and one on the right side. One on the left side here and one on the right side. Now, then the bones of the arms or the upper limb include the humerus, which is at the upper part of the arm, and then we have the bones in the lower part of the arm, which are the radius and ulna. So how do we know which bone is the radius? Now, if you were to stand with your thumb facing outwards, okay, then the bone that is in line with the thumb is actually the radius, and the bone that's in line with the pinky or small finger is the ulna. So it's in the inner part of your body. If your thumb is facing upwards, okay, and your pinky is inwards, all right, that means your whole palm of the hand is facing outwards. Now, then next we have the bones of the wrist called the carpals, bones of the palm called the metacarpals, and the bones of the fingers called the phalanges. All right. So then how about the lower part of the body? So here we have the pelvic girdle, right, which consists of three types of bones: the ilium, pubis, and the ischium. So there are a pair of ilium, a pair of pubis, and a pair of this ischium. So that makes up the whole pelvic girdle. Now, pectoral girdle is consists of the bones at the shoulder, which are the clavicle and scapula, right? But the pelvic girdle, pelvic means the hip or the buttock area here, has three bones: the ilium, pubis, and ischium. Okay, a pair of ilium, a pair of pubis, and a pair of ischium. Now let's go down further to the lower limb. So here we have the hip bone called the femur, which is very strong, right? And it supports the weight of the body. Okay, that's why it has to be strong and big, or long and big and strong. So we have then the kneecap, which is called the patella, and then the bone in front here is called the tibia. The bone at the side is called fibula. It's the thinner bone. Tibia is the thicker bone. And here we have the tarsals, the bones of the ankles, metatarsals on the soles of the foot, and then the phalanges. All right. So do we have to know the names of all these bones? Yes, for objective questions, you may be asked, which are the bones of the appendicular skeleton, or which are the bones of the axial skeleton? Okay, so you have to remember the names of these bones. Okay, so here is outlined for you, the axial skeleton, outlined in blue for you, to separate it from the appendicular skeleton. Now here are some notes on how to recognize the ulna and radius. So the forearm consists of two long bones. Okay, this is the forearm. Consists of two long bones, the radius and the ulna. And the radius, the ulna first. The ulna is located on the pinky side, okay, where in line with the small finger. Whereas the radius is on your thumb side. Okay, so if you were to stand with your palms open facing in the front, then you can trace the radius. It's the bone in front, in line with the thumb, and the ulna is the inner bone, all right, nearer to your body, in line with the pinky or small finger. So in our syllabus, we have to focus on the vertebral column, which is sometimes called the backbone or the spine, all right? So the human vertebral column consists of 33 small bones or vertebrae. Singular form is vertebra. Now the vertebrae are attached together by the joints, okay, by joints, to form a slightly curved, strong and flexible column. Okay, so our backbone is not made of just one long bone, but it is made up of 33 small bones called the vertebrae. Now this is to give us a degree of flexibility, to give the backbone some degree of flexibility so we can bend the backbone. Alright, now location of the human vertebral column, it extends from the base of the skull here, alright, in the picture here, right down to the pelvic girdle here, alright, and so the vertebral column is attached to the pelvic girdle at the bottom part. Now the function of the vertebral column, important, so the first function is that the vertebral column, as a long straight column here, supports the head and the body, and it has a hollow center for the passage of the spinal cord. So it protects the spinal cord in its neural canal, which you will observe afterwards. So the neural canal is a hollow part, okay, a hole in the center of each vertebra for the passage of the spinal cord, which are made up of nerves that transmit nerve impulses. So the spinal cord has to be protected, as it can easily get damaged, and if a person's spinal cord is badly damaged, he may become paralyzed, okay, as he will not be able to transmit his nervous impulses from the brain to other parts of the body. Okay, so the spinal cord is well protected in the vertebral column. Now, the vertebral column also provides surfaces for attachment of muscles. Alright, on the spinous process, which is a projection sticking out backwards here, and the transverse processes, which are projections sticking out from to the left and right, okay, as we will see afterwards. So all this, the word process here means projections, right? So this projection sticking out from the vertebral column provides the surface for attachment of back muscles to the vertebral column, so that we can move our body, right? Now, joints. Joints are the parts where the vertebra meet, or vertebrae meet, right? So the joints between two vertebra, there are joints between vertebra or vertebrae, and this gives the vertebral column some flexibility. Next, we have cartilage disc in between each pair of vertebrae. Okay, now you can see the cartilage disc here is the blue part here. So what's the function of this cartilage disc? It absorbs shock during movement, as it is slightly softer than bone, and it also reduces friction between the vertebrae during movement because it is smooth. Okay, it has a smooth surface. So the functions of the cartilage disc that are found between the vertebrae are very important. All right, take note of the two functions: to absorb shock and also reduce friction between vertebrae. So this diagram shows us the position of the spinal cord in the vertebra from the superior or top view, as when we are looking downwards at a person like this, right? So we will see the vertebra in this picture as is shown here, with the spinous process facing backwards, okay, at the back, and the centrum facing the front view, okay. So the front view is called the anterior view. We look at the person's face, and then the back view is called the posterior view in this case. And if you look from the side, it's called the lateral view. If you look from the top, it's the superior or top view. So basically, the vertebra consists of 3 projections here, and then a centrum, right? And it has a neural canal. So we'll discuss the functions in the next slide. But basically, the first projection is the spinous process that projects backwards and downwards, usually. And then we have 2 more projections sticking out at the sides here, which are called the transverse processes. So all these processes, the word process means projection, and it is to provide the surface area for attachment of the back muscles, the muscles at the back. And then we have the articulating surface of facets to join. Okay, it is like a surface that touches the next vertebra, okay, for to help the vertebra join to the next vertebra. Now, then we have the neural canal, which is a hole in the center here that allows the passage of the spinal cord, as shown here. Okay, so the spinal cord is like a group of nerves which help in the transmission of nerve impulses, so it must be protected. All right, so it is found, the spinal cord is found in the neural canal of each vertebra, right? Then there's a bony structure below here called the centrum, which is for support. Okay, now we're going to look at the structure of a typical vertebra after discussing its position, and we're going to discuss all the functions of the various parts of the vertebra. Okay, so looking at this vertebra, it looks like a cow with two eyes and then one horn in the center, and these are the ears, right? And this is the smiling mouth. All right, so it helps you to remember the shape and the parts of the vertebra. All right, just use a bit of imagination. So the first part is the spinous process, which is a projection that sticks out backwards, and this is for attachment of muscles. Also, there are two transverse processes sticking out on the left side and the right side, and these are again surfaces. They provide the surfaces for attachment of muscles. Then we have the hollow center part here, which is called the neural canal, for the passage of the spinal cord. Now, the neural arch is just a curved structure, okay, above the neural canal. This helps to protect the spinal cord. Next, we have the articulating surface. The articulating surfaces are surfaces that help the bone to join to the next bone, okay, to form a joint with the next bone. So these articulating surfaces, or sometimes they're called facets, F-A-C-E-T-S, they form joints with the next vertebra in the front. Now, the centrum. The centrum is a big bony structure here. It provides support, absorbs shock, and withstands compression, especially when the person is sitting down, right? This structure will give a lot of support to the torso, in the thoracic region of the body. So now let's discuss the 5 different types of vertebra, one by one. Now, in the human body, we have 7 cervical vertebrae, which are in the neck region, right? And we have 12 thoracic vertebrae in the region of the thorax here to articulate or form joints with the ribs. And then we have the 5 lumbar vertebrae at the waist region to provide support to the body, especially when we are sitting down. And then we have 5 sacral vertebrae, which are joined together. And lastly, we have the tailbones, which are called the caudal vertebrae. There are 4 of it, right? Now, this is if you look from the side. Now, if you look from the back part of the body, that means this way. If you look from this way, back, you will see that the bones look like this, right? 7 cervical vertebrae at the neck region, 12 thoracic vertebrae in the thoracic region, and then we have 5 lumbar vertebrae at the waist region, and then we have the 5 sacral vertebrae, which are joined together, and then the 4 caudal vertebrae. So this is the back view or the posterior view, whereas this is the lateral view or the side view. If you look from this side, like when you look at this boy, all right, this is the side view or lateral view. Now here's a tip that will help you to understand the difference in characteristics of the different types of vertebra. All right, so it's about their sizes. Now, usually the cervical vertebrae are smaller in size because they're up at the upper part of the body and they do not need to support so much weight. They support the weight of the skull, right? So we can say that the cervical vertebrae, C1 to C7, they are small and they are S-sized. Okay, the spinous process is small. The transverse processes are relatively small. The centrum are relatively small. Now, for the thoracic vertebrae, T1 to T12, it is in the region of the thorax and it articulates with the ribs. It is more or less moderate in size compared to the other vertebrae, M size. Alright, so the centrum is moderate in size, as you can see here. Next, we have the lumbar vertebrae. We can consider them to be L size, lumbar L, L size, because they have a bigger, each one has a bigger centrum to support the weight of the upper part of the body, which is more, alright, compared to the support that is needed for the skull, right? So the lumbar vertebrae are L size. That means they have largest of the three vertebrae. They have the largest structures like the centrum, the transverse process, and the spinous process. You can see the spinous process, the back here is quite thick compared to the other vertebrae. And finally, the sacral vertebrae, they are fused together, S1 to S5. Alright, so we usually don't explain about them in terms of the centrum and so forth, because they're all fused together. So there you have the S, M, and L size vertebrae. This picture shows two vertebrae that are attached to each other. Okay, so here we have the centrum. Now this is the lateral view. You look from the side, but you look from this side angle. This angle is from the back. So here is one vertebra, right? It has the bony structure called the centrum, and then it has its transverse processes that project outwards, and the spinous process that projects outward and backwards, right? So is this vertebra, the first vertebra is attached to the second vertebra here, but in between there is a cartilage disc. Can you remember the functions of the cartilage? It is to reduce friction at the joint and also to absorb shock. For example, when a person is jumping up and down, okay, the cartilage can absorb the shock. So the spinal cord passes through the neural canal found here in each vertebra, all right? And there will be nerves projecting outwards from the spinal cord, all right? So the vertebrae on different parts of the vertebral column differ in size, shape, and function. Okay, so there are 5 types of vertebrae based on the 5 regions they are found. Let's discuss the function. Now, cervical vertebrae. There are altogether 7 cervical vertebrae, and the first one is called the atlas. Second one is called the axis. Textbook use the term axial vertebra, but if you check in most sites or in the internet, usually the second cervical vertebra is called the axis. It's called the axis. Then C3 and C7 are the other cervical vertebrae. So there are 7 of these vertebrae. Region is in the neck. It's found in the neck. And function is to support the head or the skull and allows movement of the skull, that is the nodding movement up and down, and also the side-to-side movement of the skull or the head. Thoracic vertebrae, there are 12. They're found in the region of the thorax. So they articulate with the ribs as shown here. Now these are the thoracic vertebrae here. And they articulate with the ribs at the back. They form joints with the ribs at the back to form the rib cage. And the rib cage helps to protect the heart and the lungs, and also to help in the breathing mechanism, that is exhalation and inhalation. For example, in inhalation, the rib cage will be raised up during the contraction of the external intercostal muscles, and then the air pressure in the thoracic cavity will decrease, right? And then higher air pressure outside will force the air into the thoracic cavity, okay? And it will go into the lungs. The air will go into the lungs. So this is inhalation, all right? And the rib cage is used to increase the volume of the thoracic cavity when it is raised. Okay, lumbar vertebrae. They are found in the waist region. Okay, so these are the 5 lumbar vertebrae here. And they are used to support the weight of the upper part of the body above the lumbar vertebrae, right? So they are bigger in size because they support more weight compared to the other vertebrae on top. And they are also used for attachment of muscles at the back. Now the sacrum consists of 5 vertebrae that are fused together. Okay, so sacrum is found here and it articulates with the pelvic girdle on both sides. Right, so it connects the sacrum connects the vertebral column to the pelvic girdle. Caudal vertebrae or coccyx, the bones can be called the coccyx. There are 4 caudal vertebrae that are fused together, and they are called the tailbones. But in humans, they have no known function, no function like in the animals. They have tails that use their tails for movement and other purposes. That the caudal vertebrae is used in those cases. All right. Now here is a very good and useful table which I have drawn up to compare the 3 different types of vertebra and also to understand the characteristics of each type of vertebra. Okay, so you won't find this table in any book. This one is drawn up by me. You can copy this down in your notes and it will help you to in your revision and help you to memorize the characteristics of the various vertebra and what are the differences between them. Okay, so use this table as we go along. Now we are going to study the first type of vertebra, which is the cervical vertebra. All right, cervical vertebra. So the first cervical vertebra, or C1, cervical vertebra number 1, is the atlas, and the second cervical vertebra is the axis, and lastly we have the C3 to C7, which are the other cervical vertebra. Right? So let's start with the atlas. Now for each vertebra we're going to compare the centrum, spinous process, transverse process, and other characteristics of the vertebra. Like for cervical vertebra, all of them have this transverse foramen, which is a hole in the transverse process for the passage of the artery, for the artery to pass through to the brain. So the artery is protected by the vertebra because it passes through the hole, the transverse foramen in the vertebra. Okay, now so the atlas C1 is the first cervical vertebra. It has no centrum. It has a short and small spinous process, small and short spinous process. It has a small and broad transverse process, and it has a pair of transverse foramen or transverse foramina for the passage of the artery from the aorta up to the neck and then to the brain. Okay, so the artery will pass through this cervical vertebra or vertebrae. Now, then the axis, which is cervical vertebra number 2 below the atlas, has a small centrum. It has a small spinous process, small transverse processes, and it also has the transverse foramen or foramina for the passage of the artery to the brain. But it has one extra characteristic, and that is the odontoid process, which is a projection that sticks upwards to articulate or form a joint with the atlas above it. And this allows us to turn our head from left to right and right to left. Okay? Now, then we're going to study the rest of the cervical vertebrae, C3 to C7, which have small centrum, small spinous process, small transverse process, like for the axis. It has transverse foramen, like all the other cervical vertebrae, but it doesn't have odontoid process. The odontoid process is unique for the axis only, okay? So that it can form a pivot joint with the atlas for us to turn our head from right to left and left to right. Like when you are saying no to someone, menggeleng kepala, right now. Okay, so now we're going to look at all these cervical vertebrae in more detail. Right, so this is the first cervical vertebrae or vertebra called the atlas. Okay, the first cervical vertebra, large neural canal. So we have to know all the characteristics of this vertebra, and you have to be able to recognize it. But don't worry, as we go along, you will become more used to the shape and be able to remember the shape. Okay, so if you look at the first cervical vertebra, it has a large neural canal, like in the shape of a skull, somewhat like in having a shape of a skull, and it has small spinous process. You see, the spinous process projects outwards and backwards, right? But it has a very tiny spinous process on it because it's found in the neck. And this helps the atlas to carry out its function better if the spinous process doesn't get in the way. Okay, so there's a tiny spinous process for the first cervical vertebra. It has no centrum below. Okay, no centrum here. And then it has a pair of transverse foramina. Okay, transverse foramina. Singular form is transverse foramen. Now, where are the transverse foramen? Here and here, on both sides of the atlas, right? So the transverse foramina are just holes for the passage of the vertebral arteries from the heart or from the aorta to the brain. So this artery has to be protected, because if it's injured, then the brain may not get the blood and it may be damaged, right? So this artery will go through this transverse foramen, right, to reach the brain. So remember, the transverse foramen or transverse foramina are for the passage of the vertebral arteries from the aorta to the brain. Now, what's the main function of the atlas? It articulates or forms a joint with the skull. Alright, that means the skull will sit on top of these two white facets here, these two smooth surfaces. Okay, your skull will sit on that, and then this joint allows the skull to move up and down, like nodding, when you're nodding, to move upwards and downwards. So try and move your head up, look up to the ceiling and down to the floor. Now, when you do that, your skull is actually moving on the atlas, okay, on these two surfaces called the facets. All right, facets are the small, smooth, flat surfaces that forms a joint between two bones. They are smooth in appearance and feel. Right, now here, what's the meaning of the word transverse foramen? An opening in the transverse process here, this side and this side, of a cervical vertebra. Only the cervical vertebra and the neck have this transverse foramina, right? So the transverse foramen is an opening in the transverse process, because it's found in the transverse process. This is the transverse process, and the opening is here. So it is an opening in the transverse process for the cervical vertebra, for the passage of the vertebral artery, and even for vein and nerves to pass through it. Alright, so remember, the transverse foramen is only found in the cervical vertebra. This is the feature that will help you to identify all the cervical vertebra, which have a hole in the holes in the transverse processes. Okay, and then for the atlas, take note what are the features that help you to identify the atlas. Large neural canal, small spinous process, no centrum, right? A pair of transverse foramina, okay? And the function is to articulate, for the atlas to articulate with the skull and allow the nodding movement of the head, up and down, right? Now next we have the axis. The axis is C2 or cervical vertebra number 2. It has a small spinous process. Now you can see the spinous process sticking out a little bit. It has a pair of transverse foramina, okay, here and here on the transverse processes. And it has a special characteristic, which is a projection sticking out, okay, from the centrum here. This is called the odontoid process that articulates with the facets of the atlas vertebra's neural canal. Now we're going to look at this, how it fits in. So this odontoid process, you can imagine it sticks out, like it's sticking out from the picture here in front of you. All right, it is just like a structure around rod-like structure for the atlas to fit in. And then this will allow the action of the skull to move from side to side, okay, from left to right. Especially when you say no, when you're saying no, you move your head from left to right, right? That is because, how does this movement occur? It's because the atlas is moving on the axis and rotating by using the odontoid process, rotating around the odontoid process. All right? So don't worry, we'll have a look at the picture to better understand this. Now, what are the important features of the axis? It has a small spinous process, small transverse processes. Now, the main feature is the odontoid process that projects outwards, okay, when you look at it from the top. And it, of course, has a pair of transverse foramina for the passage of the vertebral artery, especially. So in this picture, we see cervical vertebra number 1, the atlas, and cervical vertebra number 2, the axis, right? Now, so the atlas forms a joint with this odontoid process. Imagine the atlas sitting on top of the axis, like this. This is the odontoid process, all right, which projects outwards in front of us. So the atlas sits on top of the axis, like this, and the odontoid process fits right into this part of the atlas, all right? And then there is a ligament to hold this odontoid process in place, right? So the pink structure is a ligament. And then the spinous process, sorry, the spinal cord is found in this hole here. The spinal cord is found here. Now, spinous process is something else. Spinous process is the projection sticking out here, okay? So the spinal cord is found in the hole here. And there's the odontoid process at the bottom part here. Now, so when you turn your head from left to right or right to left, as when you are saying no to somebody, then the atlas is actually rotating on this odontoid process, like this. Like this, okay? So the atlas will rotate on it, and then you're able to turn your head from left to right and right to left, okay? Whereas the surface here, the facets or articulating surfaces at the top of the atlas forms a joint with the skull to help you to nod your head up and down. So vertical motion of the head, upwards and downwards, as when you say yes, okay, to someone. Now let's talk about the other cervical vertebrae, C3 to C7. All right, we already discussed the atlas, which is C1. The axis is C2. Now C3 to C7. So cervical vertebrae number for C3 and C7 to C7 have short spinous processes each, and they have a wide and short transverse process. So this is the transverse process, and again, okay, you see two small little projections sticking out. Now this whole thing is a transverse process, and you can see the hole in the center, which is called the transverse foramen, okay, or plural form is transverse foramina, okay. So all cervical vertebrae must have this transverse foramen. Can you remember the function? For the passage of the vertebral artery from the heart or from the aorta to the brain, right? To transport blood to the brain. Now, cervical vertebrae have small centrum, right? So you will see that the centrum will become bigger and bigger as the vertebrae, as the type of vertebrae is found further and further down the body. Okay, the centrum will become bigger and bigger. So the cervical vertebrae are the first vertebrae at the top, so their centrum is small because they support less weight of the body, support the skull mainly only. Okay, so small centrum, and it has a pair of transverse foramina. So this is the feature that will help you to identify all the cervical vertebrae. They all have the transverse foramina, right? So the transverse foramen, if you look at the picture of a model of a human being, like in the real, like for a real human being, the transverse foramen is an opening on the transverse processes. Now you can see this is the hole for where the transverse foramen is found, and you can see the red tube-like structure here. This represents the vertebral artery. Okay, the red one. So the vertebral artery passes through the transverse foramen. Now, if you have the model of the skeleton like this one in the lab, you can go and observe it, and you will see there's a red tube-like structure going through the holes here. So that's the vertebral artery passing through the transverse foramen on the cervical vertebra or cervical vertebrae. Okay, so the transverse foramen gives passage or allows the passage of the vertebral artery and the vein, and also a nerve, the nerves through it also, to protect all these structures from damage, as the neck is a very thin and delicate part of the body. Okay, so all these special, very important structures must pass through the holes called the transverse foramen in the cervical vertebra. Okay, so the cervical vertebra extends from the top here, the atlas, and then moves down, and until the last one, from C1 to C7, somewhere around here. Okay, now next, let's talk about the thoracic vertebra. Next, let us discuss the thoracic vertebrae. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae. So the thoracic vertebra has a larger centrum compared to the cervical vertebrae. It has a long spinous process, okay, comparatively long spinous process that projects downwards, right? And then it has a larger transverse process compared to the cervical vertebrae. So the size of the thoracic vertebrae are more or less like medium size compared to the other vertebrae, right? So it doesn't have any transverse foramen for the passage of artery to the brain. This is not found in the thoracic vertebrae. Okay, the transverse foramen is only for the cervical vertebrae. It doesn't have a odontoid process, but it has a unique structure, which are the facets, which are the surfaces that articulate or form joints with the ribs to form the rib cage, right? We'll be looking at this in a short while. So the facets, there are two pairs of facets. One pair of facets are present on the centrum, at the side of the centrum, and one pair of facets are present on at the ends of the transverse processes. So all these parts, the facets, are the smooth surfaces that forms the joint with the ribs, as you will see later. Now, so this is the structure of the one thoracic vertebra. Okay, so there are 12 thoracic vertebrae, T1 to T12. Each thoracic vertebra has a long spinous process that projects backwards, downwards. Okay, now this is one important feature. Okay, a slim and long spinous process for each thoracic vertebra. It has a pair of transverse processes that are larger than for cervical vertebra. So this is like the medium-sized vertebrae, right? Thoracic vertebrae are like the medium-sized vertebrae. And the spinous and transverse processes serve as sites for attachment of muscles and ligaments. Okay, so all these projections are usually for attachment of muscles and ligaments. Okay, so a lot of back muscles are attached to the spinous process and transverse process to allow us to turn our body, right? Now, transverse processes have facets for articulation with ribs. Now, this is something important which is only found on the thoracic vertebrae. You can see that here you have a pair of smooth surfaces to articulate with the ribs. Okay, so on the transverse process, you have facets to articulate with the ribs. All right, except for thoracic vertebra number 11 and 12. And then at the sides of the centrum, we also have a pair of facets to articulate with the ribs also. Okay, so the blue articulating surfaces and the yellow articulating surfaces. which are also called facets. Now let's see how the ribs are attached to the thoracic vertebrae. Okay, so this picture shows you the view from the top. The view from the top. Now, this is going backwards to the back of the body. You have the long spinous process. Now, the rib cage will form will curve. The ribs will join first to the thoracic vertebrae or thoracic vertebra at the back here at 2 points. You see, this is the first facet here for one part of the rib to attach to, and then this one here is the second facet, which is found near to at the side of the centrum. All right, also for articulation with the rib, because the rib has 2 small projections here, right? And then the ribs, each rib bone will then curve to the front here and join to the sternum in front. Now this is the other rib bone, curves down to the front here and joins with the sternum in the front. Okay, so this is how the thoracic vertebra, each thoracic vertebra, forms the joint with the rib bones. The rib bones each have 2 projections. One projection will join to the facet or articulating surface on the transverse processes, and one more projection joins to the articulating surface or facet near to the centrum, at the side of the centrum. Here is a view of the rib cage from the top, as seen from the top here, like looking down at a person, right? So the thoracic vertebra is found in the backbone here, and the ribs are attached to the thoracic vertebra at these 2 points, these 2 facets. All right, so we have the facets on the transverse processes on the right side and the left side. Okay, and then we have the pair of facets on the centrum, right, at the side of the centrum. So you have one on the right side and one on the left side too. So this is for a pair of ribs. Then the ribs curve to the front, and the ribs are attached to the sternum here in the front. Okay, so the ribs curve from the back to the front here, like this, on the right side and the left side. Okay, so this picture shows you the position of the 2 pairs of facets that are only found on the thoracic vertebrae. No other vertebrae have these 2 pairs of facets that articulate with the ribs, all right, except the thoracic vertebrae. Now this picture shows you the back of a person, all right. So the thoracic vertebra are here from T1 to T12, and they have a long, each one has a long spinous process that projects backwards, right? And the spinous and transverse processes, now this is the spinous process here, transverse processes are here, they serve as sites for attachment of muscles and ligaments, and the transverse processes at the sides here have facets or surfaces for articulation that join with the ribs here. So these are the ribs sticking out. So there's a joint formed between the transverse processes and the ribs, okay, on both sides of the body. Okay, and of course there are another pair of facets each on each centrum of each thoracic vertebra, okay, to also articulate with the ribs. This cannot be seen here. This is the front view, okay, showing you the ribs, how the ribs are attached to the sternum in the front. Okay, at the back the ribs are attached to the thoracic vertebrae, but at the front the ribs are attached to the sternum. Okay, and then this is the clavicle, and you have the scapula, which is a triangular bone at the back here, which is not clearly seen. This is the scapula. All right, so if you have a skeleton in the lab, right, you can have a look at the structures. Sometimes students ask me, is it a real skeleton? No, of course we don't use the real human skeleton now. Now next we come to the lumbar vertebra. So the lumbar vertebra has the largest centrum to bear the weight of the body. It bears more weight of the body compared to the cervical vertebra and the thoracic vertebra. So it has the largest centrum of the three. And then the lumbar vertebra has a short spinous process. If you compare it to the thoracic vertebra, it looks relatively a little bit shorter, but it is large and thick. From the side, we can see that it is large and thick, as you will see in the coming slides, right? So it's short, but it's not small, huh? Okay. Now for cervical vertebra, the spinous process is short and small, But for lumbar vertebra, it may look short compared to thoracic vertebra. The spinous process may look short, but it is large and thick, okay, from the side view. Transverse process is larger than for cervical vertebra, okay, and thoracic vertebra. Now let's go on to the lumbar vertebrae. So there are 5 lumbar vertebrae, L1 to L5, and they are the biggest and strongest vertebrae, okay, compared to thoracic vertebrae and cervical vertebrae. So the spinous process may look short, but actually it's thick and large. Okay, it extends backwards. It's thick and large. Then it also has a large centrum. Each lumbar vertebra has a large centrum to bear the weight of the lower back of the body. Okay, that means the lumbar vertebrae actually bears the weight above it, the weight of the body that's above it, which is quite a lot of weight, right? So it has this large centrum to bear the weight of the body, to support the weight of the body. Then, so the centrum is the largest of the 3 vertebrae discussed so far, right? 3 types of vertebrae discussed so far. Lumbar vertebrae has the largest centrum, and one important feature or characteristic that helps you to identify this lumbar vertebrae or lumbar vertebra are the facets, okay, which articulate with other vertebrae. So the facets look like horns that stand upwards like that, upright, raised up a bit, okay, compared to the other vertebrae which still have facets but not in this position. All right, so the facets look like horns which articulate with the next vertebra. All right, this will help you to identify the lumbar vertebrae apart from the large centrum that each lumbar vertebra has. Okay. Now this is the position of the lumbar vertebrae. All right, you can see there's a very large centrum, and of course there's cartilage in between the vertebrae. All right, and you can see the transverse process sticking out here. So this is the front view. Okay, if you look from the front of a person, you can see if you have X-ray eyes, you can see the centrum. All right, this position. So there are 5 lumbar vertebrae here. Now, how do we differentiate between the thoracic vertebra and the lumbar vertebra? The first characteristic are the pair of facets on the thoracic vertebra. Okay, on the pair of facets on the transverse process, and also another pair of facets on the sides of the centrum that articulate with the ribs. This is not found in the lumbar vertebra. Okay, but on the other hand, the lumbar vertebra has a facet that sticks upwards like that, raised upwards like a pair of horns to articulate with the next vertebra. All right, so these facets stick upwards, okay, like a pair of horns are sticking out, okay, and look at the shape of the lumbar vertebra. Now, thoracic vertebra also has a pair of facets to articulate with the next vertebra, but it is not raised upwards and doesn't project out from here. Okay, so these are the facets that articulate with the next vertebra. Right? So these horn-like facets can help you to identify the lumbar vertebra easily by looking at the shape of this part of the vertebra. Now, secondly, of course, apart from the facets, the thoracic vertebra has a long spinous process that projects backwards, but the lumbar vertebra has a relatively short but thick or large spinous process. Okay, if you look from the side here. Right? From the front is not so clear. Then lastly, the centrum. The thoracic vertebra has a medium-sized centrum, but the lumbar vertebra has a larger centrum compared to the thoracic vertebra. Okay, and seems to be a bit broader. Okay. So here again, we discuss a bit about the difference between the thoracic vertebra and the lumbar vertebra by using these models that look more lifelike. So you can see here the thoracic vertebra has a long spinous process that projects backward like this. This is from the side view, when the person is like lying down. Okay, side view. And for the lumbar vertebra, you can see that the spinous process is short and thick. You can see how thick it is. Okay, when you look at the side, right, compared to the spinous process of the thoracic vertebra. Now, secondly, the facets. Facets are not clearly seen here, but you can see something like that here. Facets on the thoracic vertebra to articulate with the ribs. Okay. Now, for the lumbar vertebra, the facet that stands out is these two facets that look like horns. They're actually for articulation with the next vertebra. All right. So you can see the projection sticking out like that, right? This helps you to identify that this is the lumbar vertebra. Compared to the facets for the thoracic vertebra, they do not sort of pop up here, right? Now, lastly, the centrum. The thoracic vertebra has a medium-sized centrum, and the lumbar vertebra has a larger centrum. Okay, this is the side view of the centrum of thoracic vertebra and of lumbar vertebra. Okay, so for lumbar vertebra, the centrum is larger and thicker. Now let's go on to the fourth type of vertebrae, which are the sacral vertebrae. So a human being has 5 sacral vertebrae, S1 to S5, that are fused together to form a triangular bone that is found in the lower back of the body near the hips. So all these 5 sacral vertebrae have fused together to form a triangular bone. Okay, the sacral vertebrae or sacrum, all right, when they are fused together, they are called the sacrum. So this piece of bone is called the sacrum. It has openings, pairs of openings for passage of nerves and blood vessels from the top down to the legs, right, on both sides of the body. And then at the side here are the facets or articulating surfaces that articulate or form joints with the pelvic girdle. Okay, so the pelvic girdle is found on this side and it curves down here, and it's also found on this side here, right? So this is the surface of the sacrum that articulates with the pelvic girdle on the right side here and the left side here. Then on top here there is a hole, and this part articulates with the last lumbar vertebra, L5. Right, so the sacral vertebrae are the fourth type of vertebrae. Now let's go on to the last type of vertebrae, which are the caudal vertebrae. Right, caudal means the tail region. So there are 4 vertebrae in humans that are fused together, 4 caudal vertebrae that are fused together to form a triangular structure called the coccyx. Right, so for human beings, the caudal vertebrae does not really serve any function or important function, right? So the caudal vertebrae are bones that make up the tails of vertebrates. Now this is a fun fact. For animals that have tails, such as the cat, a cat has about 21 to 25 separate caudal vertebrae in the tail. So the tail has bones, which are called the caudal vertebrae. And this tail helps to provide balance to the cat. Okay, especially when it's jumping, okay, or running. Now, the coccyx in humans consists of the 4 vertebrae that are fused here. Okay, but it doesn't have any particular function like in a cat, because we don't use this caudal vertebrae for balance. So this model of the skeleton, right, human skeleton, shows you the sacrum here in the back part of the body, the lower back of the body, and is joined to the pelvic girdle that curves downwards like that. Okay, the pelvic girdle. And this is the part where it articulates with the pelvic girdle. Okay, so the sacrum is not a flat piece of bone, it is a bit curved like this. And on the top here, the sacrum forms a joint with the lumbar vertebra, but there is a cartilage disc between the lumbar vertebra and the sacrum. So this picture is a useful picture to show the overall summary of what we have studied concerning the different types of vertebra, starting with the cervical vertebra, atlas C1, axis C2, and then the other cervical vertebra from C3 to C7. Then we have the thoracic vertebra, then the lumbar vertebra, then the sacrum, and finally the caudal vertebra, which forms the coccyx, right? So the word dense here means odontoid process. So in the textbook, we use this word, odontoid process. All right? Now, for those who are keen to just have an overall view, these are all the different types of vertebra that we have studied, okay, with their distinguishing features here. All right, like the transverse foramen for the cervical vertebra, facets for the thoracic vertebra, and for lumbar vertebra, it has facets or articular processes that stand upwards like that, like horns, right? Okay. So have a look at this and try to understand it if you like to go through the summary. Now let's try a Solan Ramalan to end this video. So here we see three different types of vertebrae. Question: identify vertebrae A, B, and C above. Then compare and contrast the three different vertebrae from the aspects of spinous process, transverse process, centrum, and transverse foramina. 8 marks. Right, so first you have to identify the vertebrae here, and then compare and contrast. So you have to give the similarities and differences. Now for differences or similarities, we can mention about the spinous process, transverse process, centrum, or transverse foramina, and other aspects, right? So altogether, 8 marks. So pause the video for a while, think about the question, and try to write down an answer for this essay question. This is a good question that we must try to prove that we have understood and we are able to answer the questions like this in the exam. Okay, so pause the video for a while and write your own answers first. So here's the answer. Vertebra A is a cervical vertebra, and you can identify it by its pair of transverse foramina here, right, at the transverse processes. Also, it has a more or less triangular shape, right, like this. Now, B is a thoracic vertebra, identified by the facets, a pair of facets at the transverse processes, and also a pair of facets at the centrum here. Okay, on top of that, the spinous process is sharp and long, and it projects backwards. And the centrum is of a medium size. Okay, so the facets here, the two sets of facets, help us to also identify the thoracic vertebra. Now, C is a lumbar vertebra. You can identify it by its large centrum, which is more or less like rounded in shape like this, or squarish in shape. Then it has a large, short but large spinous process. And here you see two horn-like projections sticking out. These are the two facets that articulate with the next vertebra, right? Which is not, this type of structure cannot be seen here in the thoracic vertebra, right? So this is the lumbar vertebra. So by identifying all these three vertebrae, we can get 1 or 2 marks. Now, similarities. So at least have one similarity. So all three vertebrae here have the spinous process, okay, in the center here, and the two transverse processes here and here and here, right? Centrum, okay, you have the centrum, except if you're referring to the atlas, which is not shown here, right? And it has a neural canal, which is this one. Hole in the center here for passage of the nervous of the nerves, okay, of the nerves that are in the spinal cord. So now let's look at the differences. Now we have to draw up a table, and here we have 4 columns. One for all the titles like spinous process, transverse process centrum, and transverse foramina that we're going to discuss. And then here we write A, B, and C, which are the labels for the vertebra here, in the vertebrae here. And then we can write the names of the vertebrae in the columns if we want to. Now, spinous process. For A, the cervical vertebra is short and small. For the thoracic vertebra, it's long, right, as seen here. And then for the lumbar vertebra, it's short but broad and large. Okay. Next, the transverse process. For cervical vertebra, it is short and wide. For the thoracic vertebra, it's fairly large and long. For the lumbar vertebra, it's large. It's the largest, although it looks it can look short, but it is large. Now, the centrum. For the cervical vertebra is small. Okay, for the thoracic vertebra is medium size, and for the lumbar vertebra is the largest to bear the weight of the upper part of the body. Transverse foramina, which are the holes or openings, found only on the cervical vertebra. So the cervical vertebra has a pair of transverse foramina for the passage of the artery through it. Okay, these are the openings. Then there's no transverse foramen in the thoracic vertebra and the lumbar vertebra. Okay, right. So 1 mark each for one difference, right? Right. So that's all for this lesson. Please do share, like, and subscribe to my channel. And thanks for viewing. See you again soon in the next video.